Okay, so we're diving into Stoicism today. And I gotta say, I always pictured Stoics as kind of like these emotionless statues, you know? Not exactly who comes to mind when I think about handling like the ups and downs of life.
Yeah, that's a misconception that trips a lot of people up. It's not about suppressing emotions, but more about understanding them, managing them. Like, think of it this way.
Yeah.
You're not trying to turn off your emotions completely. You're learning to be the captain of your ship, even when the seas get rough.
Okay, I can see that. That actually makes a lot of sense. Because yeah, when I think about pain, whether it's physical or, emotional stuff, it can feel like this massive wave just crashing over you.
And that's where Stoicism comes in with some really practical advice,
Oh,
believe it or not. The Stoicism Explained in 3 Minutes video we talked about starts off strong with this idea of the dichotomy of control.
dichotomy of control. Okay, gotta admit, that sounds a little intimidating.
Okay.
How would you explain that to, say, someone who's just gotten a parking ticket that they absolutely deserve?
Okay, well, in that exact moment, right, you can't control the ticket. Can't control how much it costs either. What you can control is how you react to it. So are you going to let this ticket ruin your whole day? Or are you going to acknowledge it, deal with it, and move on? Stoicism is about focusing on what you can control.
Okay, I see that. So it's not about denying reality, but more about focusing on where you can actually make choices.
Exactly. And when you apply that to managing pain, which is
Mhm.
where the video pain management in Stoicism really dives into it, that's when you start to see how this ancient philosophy can help us get through tough times.
You mentioned this video gets into specifics, lays out some concrete steps. That's what I'm talking about. Give me the actionable stuff.
So it breaks it down into 5 steps. And the first one is defining what you can control versus what you can't. Seems kind of obvious, but honestly, we blur those lines all the time, especially when we're hurting.
Okay, so step one is get really clear about where that line is. I'm with you. What's next?
Step two is where things get interesting. You need to separate the actual sensation of pain from the value judgments you're attaching to it.
Okay, hold on. Give me an example. What does that even mean, value judgments, when it comes to pain?
So let's say you stub your toe. That initial pain is unavoidable,
Yeah.
right? But then what do? We pile on all these judgments. This is awful. Why me? Or my whole day is ruined.
Hmm.
Those judgments that added layer of mental suffering. That's what Stoicism tries to help you detach from.
It's like we're hitting ourselves twice. We feel the pain, then we beat ourselves up with all this mental chatter about how unfair it is or how awful it is.
Exactly. And the video makes the point that that type of thinking that just makes the pain even worse. Stoicism encourages acceptance. And not in a passive way, but in a way that lets you work with the situation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay,
But like easier said than done, right? How do you actually go from this is the worst pain ever to a more accepting place?
that's where step three comes in. You have to compare the consequences of fighting the pain versus accepting it. The video argues that resisting what we can't control, like the pain itself, honestly, it just makes us more miserable in the long run. It's like trying to swim against a rip current. You'll just tire yourself out.
So instead of resisting, we need to find a way to what flow with it. I see how that connects back to managing those initial reactions we talked about.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that pain is there, recognizing you can't just make it disappear, and then shifting your focus to how you want to respond to it. And that leads us to step four, actively practice letting go of that struggle and embracing acceptance.
This is starting to sound a lot like mindfulness, actually. Is there a connection there?
You're right on. The video even talks about mindfulness-based stress reduction MBSR as a modern example of this in action. It's about learning to observe your thoughts and feelings, including pain, without letting them immediately sweep you away.
So instead of being totally overwhelmed by the pain, you're creating some space between you and the experience.
Yes, you got it. You're no longer merging your identity with the pain. You're just observing it with curiosity acceptance.
Okay, that's a really helpful image, creating that space between you and the pain. But this all kind of begs the question, once I've done that, in the middle of
Situations. He'd study their character, their actions, their way of thinking, and then he'd try to apply those insights to his own life.
wow, okay, talk about holding yourself to a high standard. But I get it, it's not about comparing yourself in a negative way. It's more about finding inspiration and guidance from people who embody the qualities you want to cultivate in yourself.
This is it. And that person could be someone you know personally, a historical figure, even like a fictional character you admire. The point is to find someone whose resilience speaks to you and ask yourself, what can I learn from how they approach challenges?
Okay, I've got to say these 5 steps are incredibly practical and honestly really thought-provoking. It's not just like vague philosophical concepts. It's like you're getting a roadmap for navigating pain. And speaking of navigating that third video, stoicism, become undefeatable seems to take us on a little historical tour, right?
It does. And it really brings to life how these Stoic principles have been applied across centuries and cultures by some pretty remarkable individuals. We get to see how these figures, faced with some incredible challenges, use Stoicism not only to survive, but to thrive.
Yeah, this video felt almost like a Stoic highlight reel. And it starts off strong with the founder of Stoicism himself, Zeno. Talk about trial by fire. The guy loses everything in a shipwreck and ends up founding one of the most enduring philosophies in history. I can barely handle losing my keys.
Right. It's hard to imagine going through that kind of loss and coming out of it with any sense of peace. But that's exactly what Zeno did. Instead of letting this tragedy define him, he used it as fuel to develop these core principles of Stoicism. He realized that true freedom doesn't come from your external circumstances, but from your own thoughts and your reactions to them.
Wow, what an incredible example of walking the walk. He didn't just talk about Stoicism, he lived it, even when faced with incredible adversity.
And the video highlights other amazing figures too, like Epictetus. He was born into slavery, but he actually found freedom through Stoicism. He teaches us that we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them.
That right there is pure Stoicism.
It really is. And then you've got Seneca, another major figure in Stoicism. He dealt with exile, political intrigue, even forced suicide. And he faced it all with his incredible dignity and resilience.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around, isn't it? Facing those situations with that kind of composure. His life and his death are a real testament to the idea that even when it seems like you're facing impossible odds, you still have the power to choose how you meet your fate.
It really makes you think about what we're capable of when we tap into that inner strength. And of course, no Stoic highlight reel would be complete without Marcus Aurelius, who we already mentioned. Imagine being emperor of Rome while dealing with personal loss, illness, and constant warfare. That's a whole other level of responsibility.
No kidding.
And yet he never lost sight of his Stoic principles. He ruled with wisdom and compassion, always striving to live in accordance with nature and virtue. And his writings, especially meditations, they still inspire people centuries later.
It's amazing how these ideas just keep resonating across time. And it's not just figures from ancient history, right? The video brings it all the way to the present day with Nelson Mandela.
Exactly. The fact that Mandela could embrace forgiveness and reconciliation after 27 years of unjust imprisonment, it's a true testament to the fact that Stoicism has this enduring power to help people overcome even the most unimaginable hardships. It's not just enduring pain, it's about transforming it into something truly inspiring.
Mandela's story is such a powerful example of how Stoicism isn't just about personal resilience, it's also a philosophy of action. He didn't just survive his ordeal, he helped to reshape an entire nation. It's remarkable. It's like Stoicism gave him this incredible inner compass, to help him navigate one of the most complex and painful situations imaginable. And what I find really amazing is that it's not just this philosophy for emperors and historical figures. This video touches on how Stoicism connects to modern therapies, which I find super intriguing.
Yeah, absolutely. The seeds of Stoic thought, they pop up in some really familiar places, like take rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT, for example.
Okay, REBT. I've definitely heard of it, but could use a reminder.
Yeah. Basically, REBT focuses on identifying and challenging the irrational beliefs that often lead to negative emotions. So the idea is that it's not actually the events themselves that upset us, it's our beliefs and interpretations of those events. Does that sound familiar?
Totally. It's clicking with that whole dichotomy of control thing we were talking about. We can't always control what happens, but we can look at our thought patterns around those events.
Exactly. And REBT gives you actual techniques to do that. It helps you challenge those unhelpful thought patterns and replace them with more balanced ones. It's kind of like taking this ancient wisdom and putting it into a modern therapy framework.
Stoicism meets CBT. That's fascinating. What about logotherapy? That was another one the video mentioned. Right, so logotherapy that was developed by Viktor Frankl, and it really focuses on finding meaning and purpose in life even, and maybe especially in the face of suffering. Frankl, having lived through the Holocaust, he understood this on such a deep level.
Yeah, to say the least. To find meaning in that kind of darkness, it's incredible.
It really is. And this whole idea that we have this drive to find meaning and that tapping into it can be so powerful that aligns with a lot of core Stoic principles.
It strikes me that both REBT and logotherapy, they both in different ways sort of echo that Stoic emphasis on focusing on what you can control. Like with REBT, it's your thoughts. And then with logotherapy, it's about actively looking for meaning even when you're surrounded by things you can't change.
That's a great point. And it shows how Stoicism isn't just some ancient philosophy. It's woven into how we understand the human mind today and how we think about well-being. It's timeless wisdom that's still relevant.
This deep dive has honestly been eye-opening for me. I'm going to have to go back and read those Stoic quotes with a fresh perspective. You've given me a lot to think about, and I'm excited to try out some of these Stoic principles in my own life. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
I think just remember that Stoicism is a practice, not a destination. It's about showing up each day and making that choice to face whatever comes your way with courage, with wisdom, and with this commitment to living in harmony with nature. And remember, like anything else, it takes time and effort. Be patient with yourself and keep practicing.
I love that. So well said. It's a journey of self-discovery and growth. And on that note, we'll leave our listeners with that thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Stoicism. Until next time, remember, you've got the power inside you to navigate whatever life throws at you.